Shabbat Shalom. We start again the cycle of the weekly portions, and we begin this week with Genesis. I'd like to focus on the very end of the story of the Garden of Eden. As you know, Adam and Eve sin, they eat of the forbidden fruit, and God punishes them with a number of punishments. One of the punishments is given, or a series of punishments actually, is given to the woman, to Eve. And I'm reading now from chapter 3. And I will put in enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. It shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise its heel. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your pregnancy. In pain you shall bear children. And your longing shall be to your husband, and he shall have dominion over you. Now, for many centuries, the various religious authorities in several religions looked upon these pronouncements on the relationship between man and woman as a statement of what must be, as an ideal statement. And I believe that this is a complete misreading of the whole story of what is happening here. Because from the very beginning, God creates man and woman, and he creates them as two people, with neither one having any sort of dominion over the other. And he creates, Bible says he creates them both, man and woman. It is only after this sin, a sin which is initially instigated by the snake, who then convinces the woman to go along with him, and who therefore afterwards convinces the man. Both of them sin, and God therefore punishes them. And one of the punishments, one of the curses, is the fact that man will have dominion over the woman. This is a curse. This is a punishment. This is not an ideal situation. And if we go afterwards and see how the very end, of course, is the punishment to both of them, and God expels them from the Garden of Eden. We see that in verse 24. So he drove out the man, and he stationed at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim, and the flame of the sword turning itself to keep the way of the tree of life. Essentially, if we can picture this, he throws Adam and Eve outside of the Garden of Eden, seals it, puts these cherubim and a flame of a sword turning around in front of the entrance of the Garden of Eden. In a way, it blocks off the entrance, but what does the verse say? To keep the way of the tree of life. In a way, to show the way, perhaps, to the tree of life. To not hide the tree of life, not hide the Garden of Eden, to make it inaccessible, but to point the way. And indeed, ever since this first sin, ever since Adam and Eve are sent out from the Garden of Eden, the relationship between God and man has changed. If initially, when we read about the initial sin, in verse 8, and they heard the voice of God walking about in the garden in the wind of the day. This is an incredible image. God walking, it's not him, it's his voice, it's his presence, walking in the garden, in the presence of Adam and Eve. He's a very immediate presence. He's there among them. And yet, immediately after the sin, they are driven out of the Garden of Eden. God has changed the relationship between Adam and Eve and God. But that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is from that moment in time onward, to this day and onward, man is seeking to return to that utopian existence that was the Garden of Eden. That indeed is the purpose of life. That is indeed in the purpose of all humanity, to return to that ideal relationship that mankind had with God before the sin in the Garden of Eden. And I think this placing of the cherubim and the flame of the sword in front of the gate of the entrance of the Garden of Eden to point the way, to guard the way, is symbolic of that yearning, because we are supposed to be looking for those cherubim. Now, where do we meet cherubim again? We meet them in the commandments to build the Ark of the Covenant that will then sit in the tabernacle. And later on, when they enter the land of Israel, the children of Israel enter the land of Israel, these same cherubim will stand on the Holy Ark, the Ark of the Covenant that will be in the temple on Mount Moriah. Now, God, through this whole process from Adam and Eve until the children of Israel, the relationship goes through another change, and God then selects the children of Israel to be his chosen people. And the ultimate in that choosing, of course, is bringing them to the land of Israel, bringing them to Jerusalem, returning them to a relationship, the relationship between God and the Jewish people, that is centered on a place that God personally chooses where there are cherubim. Now, the temple is not itself the Garden of Eden, but it represents that utopian world that has an intimate connection between man and God. It is the closest that we can come to that sort of relationship right now in our circumstances. It represents the yearning towards ever closer relationship with God that all of us should possess. And it is these cherubim that represent that as well. And I would relate that to the curse of women as well. Women were cursed so that man would dominate over them. But we are supposed to be yearning for change. We are supposed to be moving towards the change. And that same change has to do with not only a different relationship between man and God, but it has to do with a different relationship between man and women. And I think even as in this last century, we have seen amazing things happen with Israel, the people of Israel, the return to the land of Israel, coming closer in many ways to this cherubim sort of existence. Aren't we also seeing an amazing progress in the relationship between men and women, in respect that men are learning to give to women and women are learning to give to men, coming closer to that equal partnership and relationship that we had before the sin in the Garden of Eden. This is a good thing. This is not a bad thing. Now, of course, that equality of relationship that we're ever moving towards must be based on a love of God and a yearning to do the right thing. But if it is based in that way, it is part of that yearning to return to the utopian world of the Garden of Eden. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.
Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shalom.